quite often always in opposition or running into opposition to the Roman Empire, to the powers that be, to being adopted by empire. And all of a sudden we went from little house churches, very simplistic understanding, song and the things they talk about in the Didache and some of the other early books, documents, to converting Roman public places into what they call basilicas, and there's big gatherings, and then adapting and adopting the trappings of empire, right?
You know, does that bring, you brought this up, the Council of Nicaea. Now, a whole lot of decisions were made that are still in effect today. And Constantine was at the table. Well, was God at the table? Constantine wanted to take his empire, and I think he used the Christian church in order to solidify his empire.
Now, he could have done that partly because he also was a believer. We can't.
Do you think he's a believer, or did he have another agenda here?
I don't know if I haven't talked to him lately. I haven't spoken with him lately. We haven't.
Well, what did he say the last time?
He doesn't answer my calls.
You know, I've had that happen too.
Yeah,
phone's not working there.
So, but the thing is, the trappings of worship, and she's really right about falling in love. And this was moved her. The stained glass, the crosses, the gilding, the ornamentation, the beauty of the ritual, even in a Lutheran ritual, which is sometimes less so. I think Matthew, her ex-husband, the Lutheran boy she fell in love with, is less so high church than she is, but more so than maybe what I am. And though I'd love to be high church, but it doesn't fit us. And she fell in love with that, but in falling in love with that, she began, as she studied and learned, and began to see that we can cover up with all the gold and the bangles and the stuff. The truth of the cross was just, this is an icon of torture and death that we have been able to turn as a symbol of faith. Not only a symbol of faith that is a countercultural turn, right? We're taking this symbol of death and we're turning it into a symbol of life. Well, it's an empty cross, we'll say that. And at the second point, it's something which we, as we use it, we participate in it because we're living the life of resurrection. We're trusting in the truth claim that God did something special and redeemed, that took away the power of sin and death to keep us from him, that God will never stop loving and seeking and reaching out and saving us, right? That's always there. So what ways might we, I like this empire thing. What ways, if you just give it a thought, I'm going to just let you give it a little time to think. In our worship, in the way we practice together as a community, in what ways do we resemble empire? Not only the Roman Empire and the ritual and all that, but even the empire that exists and rules our world right now, which is politics and money, right? The market and politics, right?
Hierarchy.
The hierarchy, yes. So say more about that. We have a hierarchy, yeah.
It's been handed down to us and it's sacred, so we can't change it that much.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's a theory that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolute.
Right.
Huh? There's a theory that power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think the amount of power you get, the more you get, the more corrupt you can be.
But that's a fine theory too. I think it's more than theory. I think it's you take it to the bank.
You watch.
So in terms of cross, though, okay, we have a structure. We've redefined that structure. We've redefined it. We haven't changed it much.
Yeah, see, that's putting too much emphasis on the cross.
No, I'm talking about Cross Lutheran Church.
Too much emphasis. You're talking about too much emphasis on the cross. It's Jesus Christ.
Right. Right.
And for our sin.
And the cross was the
forgiven.
Yeah. And when I say the structures that we have, we have a hierarchy of sorts. But unlike some churches where there's pastor, council, and it just flows down, our structure is interesting because we have 4 different groups that are elected, maybe more appointed at times, but elected, and they are each given responsibility to, as a group, not as individual, but as a group, to coordinate and nurture the ministries of the church. The parish planning council actually doesn't sit above them telling them what to do, but sort of sits alongside and below supporting, and pastors and staff are supposed to be doing the same, sitting below and supporting. For instance, I don't have a vote in council matters. I have a voice, and I have a position, and I have a called position to be an advisor and teacher in these things. But I can't be the flip vote. You know, I'm not going to, it's always decided by the people, and it's always decided not by the parish planning council for most things. If Board of Lay Ministry decides this is what we're going to do, we're going to do it. So that's empire, the hierarchical, top to the bottom, sort of flipped upside down a little bit. That's a really good structure we have. Yeah.
But the ultimate is the Catholic Church.
Mm-hmm.
They are the ultimate. And when I went there, they said, we are not a democracy.
No.
We are a dictatorship. And it starts with the Pope, and it flows down, and that's been there for 2,500 years. In a lot of ways, that's their problem. They can't, and I told my wife, she was raised in the Presbyterian Church, I said, you don't know how good you got it. I said, if the minister really screws up, you can dump him. I mean, it might take, it isn't easy. You don't do that in a Catholic Church. No. Only the Archbishop can do it.
Yep.
And now this new Pope, who I have a lot of respect for, is trying to turn the ship. That's a 2,500.
But those are vestiges.
Tough to do. It's enormous.
Think about how enormous Roman Catholicism is.
Oh.
A billion adherents. I think it's 1 billion. Is that right? Almost 1 billion Roman Catholics in the world. And that system, that practice, the law, everything that governs it and helps it live, really got its start in the 200s with Constantine. But it was only one. Rome was only one of the expressions. There was Alexander, there was Rome, there was Antioch, there was Syria, there were other churches. It was in the 600s, I think it was, when Rome finally, under Charlemagne, when the church was, everything went to the Roman form. Okay? And that's why it's the Roman Catholic Church and not the Antiochian Catholic Church or the Syrian
Catholic. That really
Catholic.
didn't change until Reformation, but
some, I mean,
that didn't change a lot either.
Well, the church
did a little bit. Yeah. You're a guy down here with a pea gun shooting at off a big elephant up there, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but they will even admit this is not it's not a democracy at all.
No, it's not. And but it's God works despite those structures.
And they do some good things, Catholic
Wonderful
Church.
things.
So in spite of this,
well, that's the thing.
Things, yeah.
Let's separate the structures that govern and make decisions with the people who do the work, right? Good Christians are good Christians, whatever their moniker is, right? Whatever you call them. Yeah, Mark.
I wish I could find out the program that I watch. All the things that they bring up, was explained. Like somebody said, how come after all these years the things are so bad and all that? All that stuff was explained each time through Jesus Christ.
Right.
They explained it, and it was the same questions that we were asking.
If you run across it again, write it down for me. I'd like to. Yeah.
That program was so good.
Yeah.
It's so much better than this one. It's just.
Mm-hmm.
I think in the long run, it doesn't matter whether it was 1920s or 600. We're still the same people. We still make the same mistakes. technology or whether it's learning how to use a wheel or start a fire.
Right.
We're still the same people. And so we still all need that forgiveness.
Right.
Only now it's assured.
Right.
And it wasn't assured for many people.
No.
Before the gospel, before Jesus came along, they didn't have that choice. They had all the laws. And even the laws, I mean, I don't know how many laws you had to make sure you didn't break in order to even get to the gate, let alone anything else.
You're talking about the Jewish.
I'm talking about
Any laws.
Well,
it doesn't matter.
the Hindus have been around longer than Jewish, and I mean, there's all our tensions here. But
So let me ask you a question, okay? Let me just ask a quick question, and two quick questions. Number one, do the laws as have been recorded biblically and through various faith traditions, Judaism, Christianity, maybe others, do they define and limit how God works? Or are those laws as recorded and taught by various faith traditions represent the way we can understand and make sense of the way that God works in the world? Including, why does evil exist, right? Including, why do people do things like give their life for the neighbor? Why would you do that? I mean, you know what I'm saying? And that's a big question, because there are some who would say that, okay, it's in the Bible, it's sacrosanct, this is the way it is, because this is how Jesus wrote, well, that's a joke, but this is how Jesus wrote it. But that these words were infallibly transcribed, and they describe the way it is. And then to see it that way, then it raises all kinds of questions. So what does it mean when it says this is this and that is that? And there are others in Christian tradition who have said since the beginning and all the way up to now in various ways, this is the way we confess and we understand it to be.
part of this too, isn't it? Your audience. These Gospels were written thousands of years ago. They gave an audience. Hey, buddy, you got a new audience here. I mean, they didn't know what we know as far as, let's say, astronomy. I mean, every time you turn around, they discover the scientists are awed by the whole thing.
Right. So, but okay.
Does that take should we be talking in different terms than they did 1,000 years ago? I don't know.
We are. We do this all the time.
Do we?
Theologians do this. We do this when we preach the gospel. We do this when we study together. We just don't canonize it and put it into a bound set of books, right? Humans are always trying to ask that question, where is God? You pick up a good theologian, Luther, Calvin, Jürgen Moltmann, Andy Root, who's over at the seminary. I'm reading a wonderful book with his. You're going to say something.
Yeah, I was actually thinking on what you said, Sherry. Yeah. Because I think I didn't look it up yet. I think it's like Galatians or something, but it's talking about, like, the short of it, I think, is that what God was always looking for was trusting him that led to obeying him. Because like we have the story of like Abraham being willing to sacrifice Isaac, like the way that he was tested that way, and it says Abraham believed God, and then it was credited to him as righteousness. And then you get and I have to look it up, right? It might be Galatians. It's somewhere in there in the New Testament, right? Where they're like saying like the law, basically Jesus did what the law was also trying to do, which is to show us that God's like, this is this is the way that I made this world to function. This is how I want you to function well in it. You know, the law included like, righteous behavior as well as like sanitation before they knew what sanitation was, right? Like washing your hands. And then Jesus came along and said, okay, you've gotten caught up in the rules too much now, so I'm going to show you what like the spirit of the rules was, which is this, right? It's like both times we're being shown like this is how it's meant to go. And it is a lot to live up to, and like we've never been able, or even I think I think in the end required to like live up to it, although certainly we're called to try, right? But like I like what Nadia said with the cross, where she's like, it's not like Jesus killing his son, it's Jesus is God in the flesh, right? So it's God being like, yeah, he's like,
on that cross.
yeah, like you can't like make you can't make this perfect standard, but and like something has to be done, but like that'll be me, you know? Which is where it's like love and forgiveness in that sense is like, if justice has to be done, like I'll take the justice so that, you know, I can have you. You know what I mean?
I like something she said. I'd heard this before. But we think always in Emmanuel, God in the flesh, right? God with us. That they talk about the flesh. They enfleshed. David Loesch used to call it God con carne. So like chili con carne with flesh.
Yeah,
God with meat, right? Meat, the flesh God.
That's like a reference.
She talks about the God scarred. That the God on the cross, we never see that God as the untouchable, immutable, uncaring God. It is God who bears the scars of crucifixion and pain and torture. The worst that people can do to each other. And that's an important thing because it is this God. It was this God coming and this God emerging is where Christ's salvation comes for us. And what we're called to do is then trust that that is happening. I'm talking about that a little bit. Trust that's we believe. There's an interesting thing about belief, but we trust that God is in the midst of all this, and what God calls time and time again is us to the kingdom life, which is what we talked about today. So it's interesting. I didn't go into this depth because we'd still be preaching, but in that story today from the sheep and the goats at the end of time, that Jesus brings all nations and all people are separated there in this image, right? This metaphor, this image, however you want to think. Whether that's a prediction of how it's actually going to happen, if that is a design layout, and so it's going to come to fruition that there's going to be, billions upon billions upon billions of souls being divided into sheep and goats. Or it's everybody, though. And you notice those who were given eternity were ones, not saying the ones who followed me, among my brothers and sisters, but he claims brothers and sisters differently than just those who follow him. But it were the ones who acted the kingdom life, the life we're called to live, who fed the neighbor, or fed the hungry, and clothed the weary, clothed the naked. Why can't I say naked today? Clothed the naked. That's what Jesus is pointing to. And neither side understood. Oh, when did we do that? We didn't do that. We didn't clothe you. You were never naked in front of us, Jesus, right? The disciples or the sheep say. And the other ones say, well, when did we not? Right? We never even had a chance. We did not avoid you. Well, every time you did it is what? That you did it to anybody who was in need. Really interesting. The other thing I was going to say about, Cliff, to you, belief. One of the things that's hard, that's a difference for us in our day and age than it was for the writers of these Gospels, and when these things were put down into world existed. Belief actually comes from a Greek word called pistis, and it means both understanding, right? Understanding, whatever that means, and trust. You cannot connect, you really should not disconnect in the New Testament, whenever they use this pistis word, from trust. Now, you don't have to totally understand somebody or their emotions or this activity to trust them. But you have to be in relationship. And you have to be able to be vulnerable and hand over whatever you're trusting them to. Right? I don't know if my wife can defuse a nuclear bomb.
You ever tried?
But if we're in that situation and she's the one I need to trust upon, I will do that because we have a relationship, right? And in our modern world, belief becomes all about reason.
Yeah.
And reason is all about being able to objectively prove. Right? It's all about objective proof. So how can God exist? Where are the signs of God? We can't detect him in the cosmos because there's no heavenly body that we can see by the naked eye. We can't detect God in a chemical formula yet. Okay, there's been work on the God particle in physics, right? The unexplained gluon, muon, what do they call it? Higgs boson. Is that right? The Higgs boson? Yeah. Anyway,
They proved it.
they proved it, but is that God or not? Yeah.
How would we know?
Because they proved it. They proved it. And so for us, in our world, we get lured into thinking that belief is only about proof.
Isn't that all because of the Enlightenment?
Well, it's a response to the Enlightenment. It is the Enlightenment, but it's a response to the Enlightenment too.
But we're still in the Enlightenment, aren't we?
We're what they
At
call,
least
I think
it's
we're
the Western
post-modernity.
Hemisphere. I mean,
Yeah.
here, England.
Well, we're in post-modernity.
Yeah, I was like, no, we're in post, but that's Europe that's in post.
Yeah,
We're in regular post.
we in America are coming out of what they call modernity, but that's another.
You mean the storm ain't over yet?
No, and it's changing. The goalposts are
Just
changing. Yeah.
just a new storm coming.
Say that under trust / it should be faith.
Yeah.
Because
Well, that's what faith is.
faith is
Trust.
trust.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. But
He
it's a
says-
different word entirely, believe me. Because I can trust my bank, doesn't mean I have faith in it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But
It's a
isn't-
trusting faith.
I mean, there's a big difference.
Isn't your faith? Reason's only so good because our brains are only so good. At a certain point, reason you run out of reason, then you got options, faith or not. I mean, you got no other way to go. You can say yes or no, but we aren't smart enough. Our reasoning powers are only, our intellect is only so good.
So is it the heart? Oh, go on, kid.
I was saying that's the humble perspective where we realize that we have limits into what we can understand.
Yeah, but it's true, isn't
No,
it?
but it's the humble perspective is the true perspective. We're limited, right?
Because wasn't that where how the Enlightenment came up? If people can't reason a problem in their brains, it isn't worth dealing with. Well, I don't buy into that.
It's-
You could still.
Life's changing. I mean, the whole understanding. There's so much good work that's been done.
We're limited.
But we're always going to be limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jim.
It's the blind man and the elephant.
That's right. Blind man and the
That's all
elephant.
it is.
Yeah.
Everybody's standing here from a different point of view. What they see is what they understand.
Right.
This guy didn't see it. He didn't understand it.
Comprehension.
We don't talk to each other because he's on the other side of the elephant. I don't like those people.
Right.
The version of trust that you're talking about is the one that's in the Abraham believed God.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's the same one.
Same type of
Pisteu.
pisteo.
Yeah.
Pisteo trust.
The
And it's
original language in the app.
this has been one of my favorite things to think about as
It translates it back to the
when
original.
we look for,
I'll show you.
when we try to understand why do we believe and what do we believe in stuff, is, I mean, of course, I'm also talking somewhat in opposition to those who are going to claim that there's a clear, a free and clear reading of the Bible. Is that surface reading, right? Is the only reading that's there. I've just seen it fail too much. It's too much of a complex book. And it's a book that we are preconditioned to understand in certain ways.
We're not as smart as people.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to understand
The
everything.
more resources we have, the better,
Don't
right?
worry about it. Jesus Christ is going to take care of it.
And we're supposed to trust in that, right?
Right.
That's the heart of it. And the cross is, in a way, I see the cross as Nadia describes it, as being, we put our trust in a God who was willing to give everything in that story for the sake of being in relationship to us and giving up everything in order to claim the relationship and to claim everything and saying, you bad powers. Yeah, God and Jesus, right? God and Jesus being willing to say on the cross, I will take everything, not as an exchange, right? Not as blood for blood, but because I love you and I'm willing to give, and what I'm going to give you back because of this world is I'm going to forgive. And that's really the heart of, I think, what we get to the theology of the cross.
You know, there is a book written by an ex-priest, and he called The History of God. A lot of, but his point was God took away eternity when Adam ate the apple. I don't know, this must have been some kind of apple. But he gave it back again on the cross. He claims that God knew he made a mistake by taking away eternity. Or, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he decided the right thing to do was to give it back. And that was his story.
And if you look at the arc of Scripture, if you look at the Scripture itself and what it is trying to say, you can find that. You can see that, right? Whether or not we have to, I think, be mindful of where Scripture is, where it came from, how it affects us, how it's changed. That's why I dwell a lot about word meanings and interpretation, because certain biblical, it's really great to get into some of the Bible verses and compare different translations.
This ministry we had down there, he made a big thing. He's a smart man, as opposed to myself. But he said, look at virgin. And he goes all the way back, and he said, interpretation is huge, because in, I don't know if it's Hebrew, the word for virgin can mean the same thing as young maiden. He said, could it be that an interpreter chose young maiden?
I actually think, and I'd have to look at this, I might be wrong, but I think in the parable of the silly bridegrooms, the foolish and wise bridesmaids, the root word that they use for bridesmaid is the same root word that was used for the Virgin Mary. Now, I'd have to go look at that. Now, these things are always, every book has, scholars find have subtle differences in the application of words based on the community and based on what they can understand about the author.
They embedded that is in the Catholic Church, not so much in a Protestant church, but in the Catholic Church. Virgin is enormous. It ain't huge. It's enormous.
It's a big thing.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, one of the beautiful things that we have now is, like, it's available out there to learn, like, biblical history, because, like, it's easy to make the mistake of looking at the Bible, which is like our measuring stick from God for, like, what's true, right? It's easy to look at that from our American point of view when it was written in, like, Middle Eastern culture, and so there's things that we can miss until we know, like, until we understand what they're talking about and how things worked. Like, there's so many parables, like talking about sheep and stuff that had to do with, like, the area, and, like, the more you know about the culture, the more you understand, like, in a deeper way what's going on. But also, like, I was just showing Cliff this, like, we have resources where, like, we don't have to worry how the translation was done. You can go back to the original language. Like, the app I use, like, has the original language. You just click on the verse and click on the word, and then you get what it means.
It'll tell you what it means and
But
how it's applied.
there's another side of this. So what? What if she wasn't a virgin? I don't think that changes much. And they're not talking about Jesus, they're talking about Mary. And consider, what if she wasn't a virgin? What does that change? It don't change nothing to me. But so what if it's wrong? So what?
Well,
that's fine.
And so that becomes a question of what is, when you think of, okay, so just take the Virgin Mary. And then I'm going to end with this because we got to go. And I've got meetings I got to go to. But what if you take that and say, well, if she's not virgin, then maybe Jesus wasn't born of God and man, and But that's all based on a certain type of structure that says you have to believe it in a certain way to trust it.
The important thing was that she said yes.
The important thing is she said yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What if she would have said no?
Yeah, well, we wouldn't be sitting here maybe.
You could beat this
God would have
horse
found
to
somebody
death.
else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Virgin Francie. Francis. All right, thank God for you all. Next week we'll continue with the next set, which is from Nadia to Bible, a book like no other. I forget who but it's another good one. And then we'll take a week off and finish up after Easter, the first Sunday of Easter. We'll finish up with Animate, the last Animate.
Okay.
And then after that, just so you know, we have a couple other things coming up. We are going to have the second Sunday after Easter, we're having a stewardship has voted to, they're looking at investing a significant amount of our John Glenn funds into a specific vehicle through the ELCA, which will gain us significant income off of it. It's liquid and it's good, but we're going to have a question and answer on that second Sunday after Easter to talk about the ELCA Foundation. This Funds for Mission is what they call this. Or it's not the Mission Investment Fund, it's a Fund for Mission. And it averages on, it's never done worse than like 4.5% in its history. Right now we have all this money sitting in a bank getting 0.04%. And this is a way to establish, well, we can let this money work for us, and I think it's a really good idea. It's just reinvesting from a bank into the ELCA Foundation. And we'll do that, and then there's a couple other things we're still wrapping up for April and May.
It's always about money, isn't it?
It's gotta be.
It's gotta be.